shows. It's really great to be here. My name's Rachael Roberts, and I'm a life, career and business coach specialising in working with teachers and other education professionals who are feeling anxious, overloaded, overwhelmed, burnt out. That's kind of most of us, isn't it, at the moment? I also have 30 years experience in ELT as a teacher trainer, manager, materials writer, as well as having trained in counselling, psychotherapy, meditation, and more recently life coaching. So I'm going to be talking about why your New Year's resolutions, and I don't just mean yours, I mean mine as well, never stick, and what we can do about that. So if you are watching live, let me know, say hi in the comments. If you're watching later on catch up, you could put hashtag replay, and then I know that you've watched it, and I'll come back and check on any questions or comments. So, and also if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to add those to the comments as well. So teaching, as we all know, is a demanding profession, physically, emotionally, mentally. You're having to do an awful lot of things at the same time. You're dealing with the needs of lots of different people simultaneously, and of course trying to teach the students something. So you probably already know that you need to look after yourself pretty well physically and mentally and emotionally in order to do this job. So every year you make New Year's resolutions that you're going to get more exercise, that you're going to get up from your desk at some point, that you're going to get more sleep, eat more healthily. And yet within weeks, these resolutions have fallen by the wayside. Now, some of this is undoubtedly about the very real pressures of the job, and I'm by no means discounting that. Particularly at the moment, you're likely to be under even more pressure than usual, and this is certainly part of the reason why those good intentions can fly out the window. However, I think for many of us, if we are really honest with ourselves, we'll recognise that there's often a kind of resistance to doing things which we know are good for us. We know we should go to sleep early, but we just keep watching one more episode or flicking through social media. So, what's that about? Why is there this resistance to doing things that we know are actually going to make us feel better? So that's really what I'm going to be talking about in this live, why we resist doing things which we know on one level will make us feel better and improve the quality of our lives. So as I mentioned, let me know if you're watching live now or if you're watching on replay, put hashtag replay, and feel free to add any questions to the chat as we go along or as you're watching it afterwards. So I think there are two main kinds of resistance to making positive change. So firstly, resistance to change per se. And secondly, resistance to looking after and taking care of ourselves. So let's start with the first one because it's a bit simpler. So did you know that around 95% of brain activity or more, at least 95%, is subconscious? So this means that actually most of what we think and do is not as a result of a conscious decision. Sorry, it's the dog going in and out here. So in many ways, this is a good thing because we need to have quite a lot of what we do on automatic pilot, or we simply wouldn't be able to cope with all the demands. If you think about something like walking, for example, as we walk, we're actually going through a very complex sequence of movements. So if we had to consciously think about everything that's involved in walking, it would take up all of our kind of energy and brain power. We wouldn't be able to do all the other things that we do while we're walking, like thinking and talking and watching for traffic. So it's a good thing in many ways that so much is automated. But it's also a problem when we want to change our habits, because those habits are absolutely automated as well. And the brain has spent a long time building up neural pathways. So neural pathways are kind of like connections, if you like, within the brain. Think about it like, when you play that game, probably not now in COVID times, but where you hold hands and kind of send a squeeze along the line. That's very much how the sort of neural pathways are built in the brain. And the more often we make those same connections, the stronger those neural pathways get, and they become more and more automatic. So obviously when you want to change them, you're going against all of that programming, and the brain is going to try to bring you back to the status quo, because the brain wants to save energy. And also it kind of figures, if it's working at the moment well enough, by well enough I mean you're not dead, then you may as well, keep going with that. So when you try to change a habit, you have that kind of automatic programming that you've got to change, really, and kind of create new neural pathways. So often we get very frustrated with ourselves, when we find it difficult to drop a bad habit or create a new good habit. But we really shouldn't be angry with ourselves about it, because, that's how we're biologically built. But of course, what we have to do is to try to find ways around that. So there are four main ways, I think, to deal with changing that programming. First of all, and this may sound obvious, but it's actually one of the most useful tips I can give you, make it as easy as possible to change that behaviour. So bearing in mind that your brain will always want to take you back to the status quo, if you can remove any friction, as it's sometimes referred to, between you and the new habit that you want to bring in, or giving up the old habit, then it's much more likely to be successful. So what does that mean in practice? So if, for example, it's around healthy eating that you want to make a change, then make it really easy for you to eat healthily. So that might mean preparing lunches in advance, for example, so that you don't get to lunchtime starving and just go for the first thing that comes to mind. If it's exercise, that might mean getting into your running kit at the beginning of the day, so that when you go for a run at lunchtime, you don't have to make the effort to go and change. Or if you can't do that, at least leaving your kit sort of already waiting sort of to get changed into, so that you make it as simple as possible for yourself. It's a mistake to try to rely on willpower. Most people don't have much in the first place. And in fact, it's been shown that we literally have a limited amount of willpower each day, and that kind of when it runs out, that's it. So that's why a lot of people can kind of go all day eating really healthily, and then get to the evening and splurge, because they've kind of run out of the willpower. So better not to rely on willpower in the first place, but just to make it as easy for yourself as you can. Secondly, small changes are much better than big ones. And again, this is where a lot of people go wrong with New Year's resolutions. They kind of make great big sort of, promises to themselves about huge sweeping changes, and then feel really disappointed in themselves when they can't keep that up. But by doing that, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure. It's almost a form of self-sabotage in a way. What's much more effective is to make actually very small changes that might not feel as exciting or dramatic, but which we can sustain and build on over time. If you try to implement really big changes all at once, then the brain is going to react with a lot of resistance, because making changes is not necessarily safe as the brain sees it. And then you'll also trigger kind of like your inner rebel, So this is why, a lot of people go through dry January, giving up alcohol, and then February turns into binge February, because, they've just sort of run out of willpower and feel resentful and rebellious. So cutting down, making small changes really does add up over time. Thirdly, I would suggest working on getting more mindful generally. So, as I said, we spend most of our time in automatic pilot, 95% of our brain activity. But a regular meditation and mindfulness practice will spill over into our daily life and will make it more likely that we're able to kind of stop before we kind of mindlessly go into whatever behaviour it is that we don't want to do. You want to avoid those moments where you're kind of looking at the empty biscuit packet going, oh, how did that happen? How did they get into my mouth? Right. So this is about being, more mindful and aware. We can also become more mindful about the triggers and the emotions that are coming up, which quite often lie behind kind of behaviour that we want to change. So, for example, let's say comfort eating, for example. If we're aware of the emotions that are coming up that are causing us to feel we need comfort, then we may be able to find another way of giving ourselves what we need without the behaviour that we're trying to get rid of. So that brings me to my fourth and final point, though it's a long one, which is to start to look honestly at what's going on beneath the surface. So if you have, a bad habit, let's say like smoking, that's been going on for years, you've kept trying to change it and give up, and you keep sabotaging yourself, you keep slipping back, then you need to ask yourself kind of what that habit does for you. What are the benefits of it for you? Or at least the perceived benefits in terms of your subconscious. At the root, it's usually that we have been brought up, usually by entirely well-meaning parents, with some kind of unhelpful beliefs. So young children don't have the experience or knowledge of the world to be able to kind of work out how the world works for themselves. So they tend to swallow the messages from their parents, the things their parents say, and also the things their parents do. They tend to kind of swallow them whole in a sort of undigested way. In psychology, this is known as introjection. So obviously there are lots of different kinds of unhelpful beliefs, but here are some very common ones that I often come across with clients who I work with coaching. So the number one, this is a very common one, it's selfish to put myself first. Now, this belief means that you won't get time to exercise or relax or meditate because there's always something that needs doing for somebody else first. And obviously that is then going to result in you not looking after yourself properly. I think teachers are particularly prone to this belief that they should, put others first. Now, I'm not saying you should become a selfish monster, but if you don't put yourself first in terms of looking after yourself, it isn't just you that it will harm, but also those around you. Why? Partly because you will inevitably build up layers of resentment and anger, however much you tell yourself that you don't. And secondly, because if you don't look after yourself, ultimately somebody else will have to look after you. And it isn't fair on those around you to expect them to do that or to expect them to have to give you permission to look after yourself. That's your responsibility. The second very common belief that I often come across with clients is I have to be strong. Again, I think this is one that teachers are particularly prone to. It's a slightly different angle. In this case, you aren't depriving yourself or you think you're not depriving yourself because you're strong and you don't need to look after yourself. And this can actually work for a while, sometimes for years, because people can be very strong. But unfortunately, people with this kind of belief that they have to be strong and they don't need any help or support are often the ones that kind of fall the hardest when they finally do. So don't wait for that to happen. You know, however good you are at coping, you are human, and we all need rest, good nutrition, exercise, fun, and so on. And if you think you don't, you know, you're kidding yourself, and it will bite you in the bum one day. And the third one that I come across is a belief at root that I don't deserve kindness from myself or anyone else. This one is a doozy, and it's surprisingly common. And if you were brought up in a household where people were pretty critical, including of themselves, and talked about not being self-indulgent, you know, when they actually meant just a basic level of looking after yourself, then you may well have internalized that at some level. Self-compassion is not the same thing as self-indulgence at all. Self-compassion is simply treating yourself in the way that you would treat a good friend. So not indulging yourself, but being kind, thoughtful, helpful, and so on. You know, so simply, as I say, treating yourself in the way that you would treat probably anybody else, rather than treating yourself worse. So if any of these are ringing bells for you, well, it can take time and support to work through these programmings. But ultimately, you know, that's all they are. It's simply kind of shortcuts and pathways that your brain has set up because it thinks that that's helpful. It's often not, which is why we need to work to undo them. But it's not like a character flaw. It's not, you know, that there's anything wrong with you. It's simply a bit of kind of programming that needs sorting out and reprogramming. So if you've ever wondered then why we often have resistance to doing things that are good for us, there are some reasons, both practical and to do with kind of our beliefs and our emotions. So as I said at the beginning, my name's Rachael Roberts. I'm a life, career and business coach. And I specialise in working with ELT professionals, teachers and other education professionals, often who are feeling the effects of burnout or anxiety or overload, and helping them to make deep, positive, permanent changes. And this is based on my 30 years experience in ELT, as well as training as a counsellor and coach. I run a free Facebook group for ELT professionals who are looking to manage stress and gain more balance. So please do come over and join us in that group. There are weekly lives on topics such as stress management, time management, and other personal development topics. There's a book group. We have regular guest lives. Next week, we've got an expert coming in to talk about nutrition and how that can help you avoid that 2 p.m. slump. So the name of the group is Lightbulb Moments, and I'll pop the link in the comments and hope to see you over there. Thanks very much.